Welcome to the Digit Lab seminar, where we have a guest speaker, Professor Sousa from Porto Business School, an old friend of ours. Just very briefly, for those who don't know, there might be a few people on the call. This is under the auspices of Digit Lab. Digit Lab is our National Digital Economy Research Centre, funded by the Research Council in the UK, looking at digital transformation. So it's a big programme of work, £12.5 million of funding, looking at digital transformation. And we look at digital transformation from 5 main areas. We're looking at the technology, we're looking at the business models, we're looking at the organisational systems around those business models, we're looking at what it means, the impact on people at work, and we're looking at data-driven design. So we have 5 areas that we look at. And Rui, a wonderful friend here, is going to be talking about last mile. It seems to me to be one of the major challenges of the digital economy. We're talking about last mile operations, and it's great that we can have someone come to talk to us and help us understand more about how that operates. So Rui, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. So good afternoon, everyone at home and in the physical facilities. And it's great to be here. Few friends around, so it's really a pleasure to be able to share some of my research together with his colleagues, Elliot Rabinovich from Arizona State University, Jan Fransu from Tilburg, Niels Agatz from the Netherlands, I think Rotterdam. I think his affiliation is down there in the presentation, and Stanley Lim from Michigan. And so this presentation is actually, the goal is to share work in progress ideas. So this is the team that is co-editing a special issue for the Journal of Operations Management, and we're now in the process of writing the editorial, which we want to make it more like a position paper, not just a comment on the submissions. So we are developing conceptual ideas, future research directions on this area of last mile operations. So we very much welcome your thoughts and contributions also to this this discourse. Before I jump into the topic of my presentation, let me just tell a little bit about myself. I'm a PhD from Operations Management from London Business School. I have the great pleasure to have my supervisor in the room. I'm feeling like a student again. His boss. I'm professor at the Católica Porto Business School, where I also coordinate a research center in service management. I also coordinate the Eden Doctoral Seminar in Research Methodology and Operations Management, and I teach the case study module there. I'm very much connected with EUROMA, European Operations Management Association, and currently I serve as associate editor for JOM at IGOP. So in the last maybe decade, I've been working in 2 main areas. One is digitally enabled services, which is where this presentation fits. I'm currently involved in a number of papers, one on the design of multi-channel consultation services in healthcare. Then the next 2 have closely related to today's topic. They are about omni-channel retail operations. One about the value of subscription programs, and the other one on the value of 2 options for delivering products: home delivery versus click and collect fulfillment. And what brings us here really is the addition of the special issue, which I'm going to talk about today. Now, I've also done work on securitization of manufacturing in the last few years. These projects have actually completed, so I'm thinking about new ideas, maybe around digital securitization, sustainability, or digitally enabled industrial services. So if you have an interest in these areas, it'd be great to connect and further discuss and look for opportunities to collaborate. So today I'm going to talk about a number of ideas that the co-editing team have developed together for this editorial for the journal. And the editorial is a special issue is about innovations, technologies, and the economics of last mile operations. And both for the special issue as well as for today's session, these are the goals that I'd like to achieve, which is to provide an overview of last mile operations, hopefully motivate the need for the OM community to conduct more research in this area, which has been a little bit led by colleagues from the transportation community, which do it in a specific way, and I'll come back to that later. Advance the conceptualization of the field and also discuss directions for future research, and very importantly, to get your contributions to this project. So, as academics, we always like to start with the definition, and this is how we, for the purpose of the journal, we define last mile operations. So they enable the final delivery of goods and services to what we call agents. These could be a number of parties. Could be a typical consumer, just when you buy goods through e-commerce sites. Could be non-commercial users, could be beneficiaries, for example, in the humanitarian operations, could be patients in healthcare, could be workers. So there's a number of different parties that could be the recipients of the final delivery of these goods and services. And of course, the goal is to deliver these goods and services to a predefined collection or location or destination location. So basically, we're talking about service processes that involve the transportation of goods and or tangible resources. So this could be the delivery vans, could be the medical doctor that goes to see a patient at home. It could be equipment for the benefit of the agent. Now, one of the things that we started thinking about is that actually, if you have these definitions, it's a little bit broader perhaps than what is used in the transportation community. You can actually think about two types of value propositions. The first one we call goods focused, which is the most typical setting for research, which is delivering goods to these agents which are scattered around different locations. But you can also think about more service-focused value propositions, in which really what's happening is you're delivering a service, which may not simply to be the accessibility to a good, to a location where the beneficiary or the agent is. Or, for example, as in one of my research areas, when you want to repair equipment which is in the field, again, what you do typically is you see a technician, perhaps with a number of spare parts and tools. It goes all over the place to repair those assets. So this is quite a different value proposition than just selling goods that you buy online, for example. So if you compare the two value propositions, again, we can argue that the second one requires more customization, more intense co-creation with the agents than the simple delivery of a good. And as we discussed later, we think we need to do more on the second type of value proposition that has been understudied in the field. We find last mile operations everywhere in retail, food services, healthcare, humanitarian operations, energy, telecommunications, public services. They make up a large proportion of supply chain costs. Some estimates point to 41 to 53%, and it's one of the fastest growing segments. As Roger was saying, it's fueled by digitalization, e-commerce, and all those technological developments. So one of the things that we tried to do So you start with the definition, with the relevance, is to actually think what is different, what is distinctive about last mile operations processes as service processes. So again, this is very much work in progress. So we very much welcome your contributions, but I'll try to spell out our thinking about what makes these processes distinctive, maybe worthy of a special area of study. Well, for once, these LMO processes, last mile operations, they are positioned in the very last stage of the supply chain. So they fulfill final agent demands, so the last mile. And there's a number of implications. First, we need to deliver goods and services to widely scattered locations. Second, if there is a process execution error because you're in the last mile, there's less buffers, so you don't really have lots of inventory at this stage. So if there's an execution error, it becomes immediately evident to the recipient of the service. They tend to work with very short time frames, so we're talking about usually high expectations for quick provision or delivery of goods and services. And then we also need to cover very different kinds of environments. So, for example, one of the things I'm interested in and did some research about is what's different when you want to deliver in rural or less densely populated regions. So the economics there are very challenging. It's very expensive, but still you may need to cover these regions for social responsibility, for inclusiveness, being inclusive towards your customers. So we need to think about different models to serve these kinds of populations, or maybe populations in underdeveloped countries, which have different challenges. And of course, even if you take the typical urban setting, which is what we're most used to, there are specific challenges there, like traffic uncertainty, congestion, narrow roads, increased regulations and restrictions for accessing consumer locations. So again, all of this makes these operations quite challenging. So not a lot of slack for mistakes and substantial challenges. The other thing that we thought about is that these processes have high agent or we're more used to the word customer-induced variability, but in this case, agent-induced variability. Being a service, it has a specific kind of feature. So we need to fulfill individual agent demands. So we're working at an individual level at geographically dispersed locations. Moreover, these individual agents, they specify key aspects of the service. So the location, the time, the goods or the service that each of these individuals is requiring, which is different from one to another. And as co-creators of the service, they introduce, from service operations, variability into the system. So if the customer is not at home, there's a failed delivery. If they don't like the good or service, they may generate returns. There's a lot of variability that comes from serving individuals in a somewhat customized way at individual level. And so this points to the need to really manage trade-offs between efficiency and service, which is a typical problem in service operations. This is the classical diagonal fry. So usually for example, if you want quick deliveries, it will be more costly, and vice versa. So more service, more cost. But there are also ways to mitigate trade-offs, and maybe good ideas to go back to the service operations literature, maybe at a broader level, try to research on trade-off mitigating strategies applied specifically last mile operations. The other feature we thought about, and by the way, these features, they all point to challenges, is that even though there's been a lot of automation, increasing automation, there are still very labor-intensive processes. So we need drivers, we need technicians or medical doctors to go to patients. There's huge shortage of labor to perform these kinds of jobs. And this makes these processes with low scalability. So which is really a challenge because you're talking about high volumes, huge volumes, with labor-intensive, low scalable processes. That's why the economics are so challenging. Moreover, because of this labor intensiveness, there are significant behavioral phenomena and papers recently started looking at this, for example, how the drivers behave. Being careful about their welfare or exploiting in a positive way the knowledge that they have about the routes in specific areas, or the service, the personal service they can deliver to customers. So that's subject to behavioral aspects that can play quite a significant role in these operations. Still, of course, because they're labor intensive, there's a strong motivation for increasing automation, or at least to combine automation with humans in providing the service. Now, another feature, and again another challenge, is that these operations or these services, they take place in the public space. It could be this in your home, it could be a public facility, a sidewalk, a collection point on the street. So they take place in the public space. And this again raises a number of implications that we need to consider. First, it requires a high reliance on public infrastructure and a consideration of a broader set of stakeholders, well beyond the recipient of the service. Second, it increases the exposure to factors outside the control of the focal organization, such as traffic or public events taking place in the public space in a certain way. They also have high public visibility. So if there is an accident with a van and injures someone in the public space, or all these issues we see in the media of the workers thinking they're being treated unfairly, those and so on. All this creates heightened reputational risks that are associated with this operation, because indeed they take place in the public space and are exposed to these reputational risks to higher extent than perhaps other types of operations. And also there are restrictions to the use of technology and automation, because they can create risks. So for the drones, they may place security risks or create congestion in the public space. So again, there are other stakeholders, broader issues that come into play when you design and execute these processes. The other feature is that these processes also have very significant impacts on sustainability. So transportation processes are energy intensive, so it costs energy and emissions to move stuff around. And it creates negative externalities such as gas emission, air pollution, noise, congestion. So this is on the environmental side. On the societal impact side, again, it may impact the public space. There are these issues that I mentioned earlier about social responsibility or having the duty to be inclusive. For example, healthcare services need to reach patients wherever they are. Humanitarian logistics also needs to reach people in very challenging situations, or underdeveloped or fragile communities. So I was told yesterday in one of the discussions I had at Lancaster that one British retailer has a policy of grocery retailer of providing online deliveries to everywhere where you are at least once a week. So there's a limit on how much you can use the service, but they have a pledge to not leave anyone out of their online service. This is what I was told. Again, so that there is this this issue of being inclusive in the service that is being provided. And maybe because of all of this, there are challenging economics and network complexity, high fixed and high variable costs, large volumes. There's a lot of subcontracting and reliance on multiple parties. So again, managing incentives, alignments, contracts, behaviors becomes a really big factor in these operations. So this so far is where we are in terms of what we think is maybe distinctive or characteristic of last mile operations. Before I go on to some research directions that you also thought about, maybe you can give the opportunity to answer any questions or maybe take some contributions of other features that we may be missing, or maybe these ones are not so unique to last mile operations, perhaps, before we move on to the second part of the presentation.
One thing that occurred to me listening to this was Royal Mail or letter delivery. Sometimes it's individual, sometimes 20 all at once. Is that within your remit? I know parcel delivery probably is, but letter delivery, because some of the issues there are like having to deliver across the whole country seem to be very common.
So, and then those letters will be further delivered to individuals or will be delivered to institutions or organizations?
Well, say individuals, state mail, yeah. Royal Mail is required to deliver letters to anywhere in the British Isles. Even if you live on an island in the middle of nowhere, they are required to do that. So, but, to me, is this within your remit, letter delivery, or is it because on the whole they deliver lots of letters at once?
No, it would be part of our scope.
Okay.
So probably last mile will be defined as the line between the distribution depot, the last distribution depot, and the final destination of individuals.
Have you considered the as part of low cost accommodation, some of the service providers are starting to look at what I would think looks like a co-creation model, where they'll go a certain distance, but you have to come to them. So we're starting to see a little bit of low cost accommodation of things like Amazon lockers or parcel delivery slots, where there's some variability, but they're trying to reduce that variety choice. By asking the customer to do the work. Does that fit into your?
Yeah, that's actually a great example of that. So the last mile would then stop at the collection location,
Right,
and the customer would have to go there to pick up their.
But like any co-creation activity, then the last mile delivery becomes sort of the first mile for the customer to then have to co-create the outcome of that service.
But there's actually a great example of the trade-off between service, which is not going to the final consumer home, and cost.
One of the areas that always fascinates me is that I live in London. So if I want to order an electronic component today, I will almost certainly get it delivered tonight. Which suggests that Amazon have understood risk pooling, if you know what I mean by it, in a way that seems to me to be fantastic. It seems to be mind-boggling. And when I look at where that agent goes to deliver my electronic components, right, actually their zone of operations tiny. You know, they're only moving within about 3 miles of my flat. So it's kind of somehow their warehouse has the components that are necessary. That's why Bristol building comes in. Has the components necessary to meet my demand prior to me knowing that I have that need. How the hell is that working? Well, I want to know that algorithm.
You have the data.
Yeah, I really do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is a general trend and moving the inventory. You know, we were just talking about last night, but
Yeah,
the whole chain,
yeah,
closer to where the customers are, because of this increasing time and expectations.
Yeah.
To find a student.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's kind of how they do that without having lots of stock.
But the scale, in other words, to be able to do this, you have to have scale. I think that's an advantage of scale.
Yeah.
Everybody has a scale that can do this.
Just, if I may build upon the wonderful comments and infuse some very positive energy to say that this is wonderful work. We've been working with so one way to do this would be to improve scale, right? And be able to deliver and improve the inventory management. But the other way to do it would be to introduce a digital innovation of a modular drone that has the capability of carrying high capacity of carriage at a higher level than others can. And then the problem becomes to set a mass customization ecosystem of network infrastructures, which is the topic of the collaboration I have with being a team who have created this drone and patented it. And it's been vetted by the Ministry of Defense. In fact, BMT has been in close collaborations with Index and the University of Exeter, as an Exeter associate myself, and currently at the Department of Information Operations Management at Royal Holloway. This just opens Pandora's box in terms of possibilities. So we might just want to have a chat afterwards, but just to say, excellent. This is really mind-boggling, very good work.
Thanks. So the drones carry goods or orders for several customers.
That's right. So we actually, yes. So as part of the business analytics masters that we have at the business school, we had a close collaboration. A student did some work on creating unique customer service mapping profiles, so that the drone, being modular as is, has the capability to analyze in real time all types of complex data sets, from weather, noise pollution, public traffic, using Internet of Things, and is able to deliver the parcel that Roger would order at a point that is convenient, not only to Roger, based on the slot, but also based on the weather patterns, congestion systems, and most importantly, noise pollution.
It's very useful. And then it delivers in sequence, so it drops one.
It is AI coordinated. So it actually, because it's modular, there is an AI coordination between the drones using machine learning that coordinates according to customer needs. So we have a new service development here, which is a mass customization, which I believe would actually bring some new insights in many of the challenges, right?
Actually, one of the examples I found, and if you have time, I'll show the video, is like a network, a service which consists of a network of drones, which cover a region.
Yes. Well, let me just say that the project is now currently open for multiple collaborations for funding. So let's have a chat. You're welcome.
Okay, then from a more academic perspective, then we thought we were thinking, in terms of research, and specifically from an operations management perspective, what are the needs? Some authors rightly say that there's a lack of a unified and integrated theoretical framework for last mile operations. There's a lot of work, again, being done by transportation community, usually optimization or very technical stuff, which is valuable, but they tend to address piecemeal problems and kind of lacks the big picture of the integration of all these challenges that we've discussed. Another thing that we think would be desirable is to build stronger theory for operations and trying to understand these challenges. So we have a lot of interesting stuff in service operations, for example, trade-off between service and cost and mitigating strategies, new capabilities that may be needed, behavioral operations to manage driver behavior, agent behavior. Critically, of course, integration and information sharing in complex supply networks. So there's a lot of bodies of theory or knowledge anyway around that could be more strongly embedded in research. And then Chris is here. I have to say this, of course. There, if you look at all these decisions in last mile operations, they're really a multitude of variables or decisions that need to be made and work together. It's kind of a configuration of choices. So it has to do with the distribution network, how you cover the last mile. So I think all of these are a multitude of decisions that need to be integrated. And what we see out there is a huge diversity of models. So, which is also good, a lot of innovation. But I think there still needs to be more consolidation in understanding what kind of typologies or configurations or models work to deliver different kinds of services or to deliver these services in different kinds of areas, for example, urban versus rural. So our suggestion is to develop contingency theory around LMOs and strive for more prescription on which designs or which models work in which situations. And then the final one is to motivate research at the interface of operations and marketing, because again, this is all about serving customers in an operationally efficient way. We need to manage the final agents as people, as individuals. We need to manage customer experience with operational efficiency. Our other suggestion is to broaden the scope of the research on LMOs in a number of directions. The first is complement existing goods-focused research on goods-focused LMOs with more research on service-focused LMOs, for example, sending medical doctors to patients' houses and so on. Also, the B2B setting, at least from an operations community, seems to have been more neglected. And there is a really growth area around industrial services or civilization and manufacturing. And a typical example is, say, a manufacturer of elevators that has elevators installed all over the country. They need to be regularly serviced or attended to in case of emergencies very quickly. And so these, again, our last mile operations, service focused, not really goods focused. So again, there is opportunities there to develop more knowledge on these B2B settings. And then the final one, not the final one, another one that we picked is, and I think Roger, you were saying that with the IKEA example earlier, is to integrate the design of the solutions, could be the products, services, or both, with the design and execution of last mile. And a great example that Carlino and Rudekirk mentioned in one of their papers is Tide's EcoBox, in which they develop not only the product, but the packaging, so that it's very concentrated, so it takes less space in the trucks. And the box is also designed to be easily stacked. So all of the solution, in this case, the product and the fulfillment service, were designed in an integrated fashion with the view of optimizing the last mile operations around the product, which includes, end of life, and reverse flows, end of life recycling, and all the circular models that are emerging. Then also the need to cover a more wide variety of contexts, not just EU or US. I don't know a lot about this, but there are many innovations coming up in China. Of course, in the EU, all these new regulatory frameworks around environmental sustainability, like Scope 3, that if it goes ahead, manufacturers or providers will be responsible for emissions not only within their factories or operations, but also upstream, their suppliers, and how consumers use their products. So all of that will be on the responsibility sheet of the product provider. And so this includes also the impact of the last mile of delivering these products to the final agents. And of course, there's a lot of diversity in institutional and infrastructural contexts across the world that also perhaps require more research. So again, broadening the scope in terms of the variety of contexts that have been covered. So this is the exciting stuff that we were talking about. There's also a lot of emerging technologies coming up and being used in the last mile. So it's a nice paper by now and colleagues 2D2, and they list these these technologies. Let me see if this works. Let me try to show you a little bit. The link is not here. Okay, never mind. We'll come back to that. Okay. Okay, there's no sound.
Command.
It's possible to have the sound. Not it's okay. I'll try to explain it.
We'll get some feedback, won't we, if we're not careful here? We might get a feedback system.
And that's sustainable.
Yeah, we've got feedback. Yeah, that's what we're going to get.
Okay.
I think the device sometimes on Teams needs to be saved.
No worries.
Yeah, I'm it's working. It's magic.
Basically, I think this is a really interesting idea in that rather than having drones deliver individual orders or covering point to point, the logic behind this new service is to have a network of drones that are shared. So it's a network service that is being offered to whoever wants to cover the last mile. And again, using AI and data and sharing, they can optimize how these drones move and where they are located to cover a particular region, like a cloud of vehicles that cover a particular region rather than point-to-point deliveries. So, which I think is a really clever idea. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's going to be successful. But from a research perspective, I think there's also the need to understand all of these emerging technologies and how they play in terms of designing and executing the last mile operations. Also, a lot of things coming up on predictive and prescriptive analytics for last mile operations. Caro and Rudekirk have two very good papers on taking stock of the opportunities here. Basically, there's a lot of data being generated and captured in last mile, and can build on this to improve the experience and efficiency of the operations. And because increasingly these operations are being supported by technology, it also raises the number of research needs on understanding how to implement technology in last mile operations, which includes building new capabilities and training people inside organizations. Could include technology acceptance issues with the workers or the customers that are going to use the technology. Could include legislation like backlash towards protecting consumer and worker privacy, integration with the public space infrastructure, which is again challenging, and of course, sustainability impacts of these technologies.
A quick question, if I may. If let's just say that the barriers of technology implementation are all scrapped and we have full access to immediate flying drones that can deliver, what would be the governance of that system and who would own the ecosystem and who would be the one coordinating?
It's a great research question. Maybe I'll add that to our.
Well,
it will be acknowledged. Yeah, that's a great question because it's a shared resources and network service.
Emerging technologies is my area of expertise, so love to discuss more on that.
Thank you. And hand in hand with emerging technology, there are also emerging business models that need to be better understood. So this emergence of platform models, crowdsourcing, like this. Interestingly, I also found this video. I'll show it here. In that, acknowledging labor shortages and the importance of the drivers, the behavioral aspects around drivers in last mile operations. Actually, Amazon has redesigned and developed these new vans, a little bit like the Tesla concepts, that they are designed for driver comfort and driver welfare. Apparently, they are producing very good results in the US. So, which matches a little bit with what we said before, that this is a key area for last mile operations. Then we also have a huge growth on subscription models. I'm actually doing some research on that. So, for example, the Amazon Prime, which you pay a fee upfront and get free deliveries. Of course, that creates a better value proposition for the customer, but it needs to be provided efficiently and mitigate opportunistic behaviors like ordering a lot of small quantities. So, or even those that anticipate your needs and send the goods to you without you having to order. So all of these need to be understood in terms of the implications for last mile operations. And the other one we find, which is really interesting to me as well, is the growth of decentralized manufacturing. You have 3D printing, for example. You order 3D printed goods, just printed close to where you are, and then again you have the typical last mile challenges is to take all of these 3D printed goods from these printing locations to the individual consumer homes, which is a typical last mile problem.
Yes. Just a quick comment on that. Two things. We have a comment in the online chat which might be useful to.
Yeah, we're going to do those in a minute.
Okay, great. In terms of 3D printing, I've spent a good decade studying 3D printing in bioprinting of organs and medical devices in healthcare. And so having that expertise, we worked with the organization I mentioned earlier to provide last mile 3D printing delivery. So what is needed is 3D printed on the actual drone or upon the package arrival with an added 3D printed 3D printer. And that is very useful when this has been applied in the defense and or medical supplies delivery to previously inaccessible areas. that drones are most efficient for. But it has, of course, huge implications for healthcare, for any other service model that includes, for example, the customer deciding as the drone is coming towards them what the actual product they want is.
So the 3D printer is attached to the drone?
Yes, because the innovation of this specific drone is that it's a drone that is part of a larger, very efficient drone that can fly at a much higher altitude to the altitude that it cannot be detected, and has a very suitable and carbon fiber dropping cable that delivers the goods. So I think, yes, just to summarize, 3D printing is a very big emerging area, but it all connects back to who owns the data, who's the data, what type of data.
A very, very important point. Then, in our view, we also think that there is more research on the design of the last mile than on the actual execution of the processes. So we have some opportunities here. So one of them is incorporating the tacit knowledge or agents know-how, drivers, and so on, that work around systems in an efficient way. Understanding consumer behavior so as to explore situations where, so to speak, we can cut down on service without measuring implications for the customer, and therefore increase efficiency of the last mile operation. Use AI to detect points of failure for early intervention, and so on. Still on delivery execution, a little bit on the integration of the operations with municipal policies, because again, these operations depend on public infrastructure. There's opportunity to step back a little bit and also integrate with city logistics decisions. I don't know, maybe you know about this. I picked it up from somewhere. The City of London Corporation just created a hub for consolidating last mile deliveries to reduce congestion and share resources to cover the last mile. So this is a good example of these kinds of innovations. And then it's also the need to examine how reverse flows related to returns or end of life cycling of products could be integrated into forward-looking last mile operation. I think that the final one that we have here for future research is embedding sustainability in the design and execution of these operations. So there have been some studies on the environmental impacts of online delivery and so on. And of course, it's a complex problem, but we still really don't know. Some studies point to the fact that, for example, home deliveries can be beneficial for the environment because they take cars off the roads. But that's not the only factor in this packaging. Even with the physical store locations, they have a carbon footprint, they need energy, they need refrigeration, and they are less efficient than big warehouses. So we need to factor all of these dimensions together to really get at what's more beneficial from an environmental perspective. Second point I find quite interesting, and we've seen some examples of when you check out in online orders, some providers now offer like a green option for delivery. Usually, I think it means less service, but also interesting to understand how sensitive or reactive consumers are to these kinds of incentives. So, are you willing to trade down trade off your service to save the environment, and to what extent.
When you say less service, that's a bit of a perspective, right? Because if I choose that, that's enhanced service. Okay? If I choose the green option, I'm actually gaining.
You're right. You're right. And that's not the way to
Just a different value proposition.
yeah, exactly. So you are valuing the green part and you're including that part as part of your value proposition. And then this is more in the EU, how will all these new regulatory framework impact the design and execution of last mile operations? Then I won't go through this, is really descriptive, but in the paper we intend to cover then more specific issues per sector, because retail is different from food, is different from humanitarian. So we have some opportunities here at sector level for future research. So that we can have a little bit of discussion and questions, I will stop here. I have some suggestions here that topics that we may engage in, but do feel free to provide feedback, criticism, questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is more related to research. So if you take a journal like Journal of Operations Management, which is theory-based, but also empirical, one of the interesting questions is, to what extent from a conceptual or research perspective are last mile operations really distinct from other kinds of operations, and do they deserve some different focus or different approaches? How can we leverage existing theories to understand these operations better, or in the reverse, how can these operations teach us about broader issues in operations management? So that's one of the things we find interesting.
Really, does the LR community, sorry, Leroy, I'm looking at Leroy in a second, kind of think of this just as a travelling salesman problem?
That's been a little bit the approach. So,
Right.
So I think there was a point somewhere in the slide. These are complex operations.
Yeah.
But because the approach of this community is really much based on modeling and analytical modeling.
Yeah.
They require a lot of simplification and assumptions
Right.
that actually make the problems very narrow.
Okay.
And looking at small parts of the whole. That's what we think are missing. And the OM community, which tends to look at things from a more conceptual or managerial perspective, could add to the OR community.
It's a modeling challenge for a lot of people. That's where they'd be interested. So it's a complex rather than a modeling challenge.
Well, Rog, do you think the OR, the traveling salesman problem assumes a single type of context and product? Because as you're talking and thinking, so much of this really depends on the thing being delivered. So if I put food in a box, it's a very different thing than if I put a Hoover in a box.
Right.
And if we're talking about traveling salesman problem, we're assuming the same thing's being delivered repeatedly. We're just optimizing that for that thing. But if in that van we have 5 different things, or 2 or 3 different things, then the traveling salesman optimization problem breaks.
Other than, I agree, but other than you can have a refrigerator, you can have vans that can do multiple things, can't you?
Well, then the Tesco, refrigerated versus
exactly.
ambient versus frozen, all in the same box. But that's a slightly different algorithm than single product issue.
I'm kind of interested that your definition includes taking the agent to the problem, if you like, the nurse or the doctor, which is definitely in addition to the standard last mile delivery problem, isn't it? It's correct. Yeah. Do you think that the problems are the same for TNT and Amazon as they are for scheduling a bunch of?
No, absolutely not.
Right, good. I think they're different sorts of problems.
It's from a conceptual perspective, I think it may, for us, it makes sense to call them this problem, because even in goods delivery, typical goods delivery, there is always a small element of service.
Right.
That's not true for delivery people, but sometimes okay. So
Okay.
so, and if we take that to an extreme, then you could have situations where, the typical definition of service. And so what you're really using is a bunch of resources for the benefit of a recipient.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a narrow service, which is delivering a particular good to the recipient location.
Right.
But conceptual is the same kind of operation, which is a service process that involves movement, offering and operate resources to serve final. It may not make sense. It may make things more difficult.
We have Virgo and Lush included in the conversation, really. Yeah.
Just to add to the conversation, I think this is an inherently multi and interdisciplinary problem. And to provide some more clarity, I think there's recently been a lot of special issues on emerging in they're called intelligent technologies in the fields of organization theory and management studies. And so the whole idea there being that it's we inherently need a multidisciplinary perspective because no one discipline can provide all the answers. Naturally, by definition, since to coordinate a last mile delivery, you require an algorithm which by design needs to include elements of who, what, why, and not to mention any areas where by design we miss and omit different inclusive criteria, which then create a coordinated, decentralized network. Could be centralized, but it is decentralized, and that introduces a further element of governance into it. So interdisciplinary approaches would be really useful.
Chris?
I'm thinking about predictability. To what degree are there various ways of predicting what last mile delivery is needed? I can think of 2 or 3 examples. One's a long time ago. I did with involvement in elevators. You mentioned elevators. But it's still does. It's a long time ago. I had real-time monitoring of elevators. So you could predict when a service would be needed, which means you could schedule very carefully what's needed. You could maybe even prevent the need for actually delivering. So real time. So it's predictability there. Secondly, is in terms of what people are having delivered. Is it, for example, a one-off, like Roger wants a spare part for something or other, which is obviously is not predictable, probably not predictable. On the other hand, a lot of the deliveries seem to be much more predictable. They're in terms of groceries, for example. Therefore, to what degree can you predict this? To what degree can you lead to consolidation, so you actually don't want as many deliveries you actually do less often. To what degree, and then I suppose consolidation is slightly different. There's a later consolidation. So the Royal Mail comes back to me. The Royal Mail now basically says first class mail gets delivered when it's needed, but therefore you consolidate everything else. You have, if you're lucky, you get one delivery a week of 50 letters.
With Royal Mail.
Gone out yesterday. But it seems to be predictability is having technology data for predictability must provide you with the opportunities for doing things either to minimize the need for delivery and or to schedule the delivery more effectively and to make it more effective.
Right. Thank you.
I've got a couple online. I think we've dealt with some of them, really, but somebody wanted to consider how we're distinguishing sort of goods oriented and service oriented last mile operations. And I think you discussed that at the start. Could you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, so maybe I can give the goods oriented position. I think it's we understood.
Also,
we order something from Amazon and get it in our homes.
Yeah.
An example of service oriented small operations would be some of these models in healthcare where You have people living far away from hospitals, for example, and instead of having the patient go travel a long way, a location where the service provision resources are centralized, is to actually move the service provision resources towards the customer. Maybe have doctors covering, like the traveling salesman problem, covering a particular region.
Would you put ambulances in that service? Would you put ambulances in that category?
Yes, that's actually a good example. It involves a vehicle and medical staff, nurses, and like emergency services, for example.
Yeah.
You know, I think they fit this typology. So it's a last mile. They need to reach individual consumers or agents. Very short time frames. Scattered. You need to reach it everywhere. So that's actually a great example.
Okay, so I think one theory that might be rich with this last mile problem context is sort of like going along with what you're saying is there's it's not the same for everybody, and you think perhaps maybe there's some sort of price discrimination that actually should be going on with like if I live way out in the boonies and I call an ambulance, I'm costing the taxpayer a lot more than if I live like 2 minutes from the hospital. Or if I call up Amazon and they deliver a package to me and I've got like 4 foot tall fence they've got to hop over, an angry dog they've got to kick away, and some sort of annoying doorbell that they have to like unlock the door to leave the package inside. Like that's going to take 10 times as long as just chucking it on the front doorstep.
Chucking it in the doorstep is a risk
So
reduction, isn't it?
It's a good example of one of the things we think is distinctive is you need to manage the agents, the final recipients. So you need to influence agent behavior to help. I mean, this is not new. It happens in services, institutional service problem. You need to manage not only the workers, but you need to manage the customer.
Also, it's a social innovation.
So they have behaviors that are makes the service provision easier or more efficient.
I wonder if you could leverage that by saying, if you have all of these annoyances, like we're going to raise the price for you specifically, use that as a mechanism.
Some possible strategies.
If you have a dog, we'll charge you.
We're going to a blacklist and
Yeah.
Imagine gamification that's going to happen on that for them. I'm going to say I don't have a dog.
Yeah. Well, they'll check your orders for dog food though.
yeah. But this is happening, for example, when you now at Uber, I think the drivers rate you as a customer, right? So I guess the same could be going on in last mile operations. You as a customer are also being rated by the provider of how you behave.
My question is kind of probably tangential from the main core points you've been talking about. I was really intrigued with the idea for sort of humanitarian work, that last mile seems to be vital. And I wondered, well, there's two things I wanted to ask. I wondered whether you had any submissions to the special issue that picked up a sort of humanitarian issue. And secondly, that considering the complexities of that last mile, getting things to where it's really needed, and it's not easy, and it's difficult to work out priorities around, the most needy against those who aren't, must create a kind of situation whereby the trade-offs doesn't make sense, but porias do. There's impasses. It's really difficult to know how to decide. And I just wondered whether, is that I mean, it's not operations, but it can link to sort of, management and strategic issues. And I just wondered whether, if you had people writing about the sort of humanitarian examples of the last mile, whether it would open up avenues for sort of other ways of thinking about some of the entrenched difficulties around the issue.
Sure. I don't think we got any specific submission I think that's a good example of where there's an opportunity in broadening the scope. I think there's an opportunity to learn from different contexts. And now people work in these sectors, they see themselves as
just
humanitarian logistics people. They don't see themselves as doing work on last mile operations. But perhaps there's a lot of learning that can be transferred from humanitarian to more regular last mile operations and vice versa. So we hope that if we start conceptualizing it at all level, see commonalities and comparisons, I think you can learn by integrating these things. They share some challenges, and learning can be transferred. I think my perception in this community is that they don't see themselves as last mile or logistics people. They see themselves as humanitarian operations and researchers.
It's been very commonly done that the humanitarian context has been used as the empirical extreme case ethnographic work in the top management journals such as academic management, especially, or organizational science. So I think we need to define this outside the scopes of one discipline. This is by default an interdisciplinary problem, and each and every discipline has its own lens that can apply to an empirical context, or we can take the context to be informative of the larger phenomenon.
It's also, it's a very simple concept, but its elegance is that when you look at commercial operations like Amazon and so on, I think rather than just thinking about customer experience and operational efficiency, actually the performance metrics should be broader. There should be an environmental component there, maybe a social responsibility component, and this really affects how you manage and what you're willing to do.
As academics, as academics, we have the responsibility to provide these frameworks to begin with. So I just noted that you had a sentence earlier on, as one of the major areas going forward would be to develop a unified theoretical framework. I wondered what that, in your understanding of our participants here, look like.
We certainly don't have the framework, and this paper will not aim to develop it, but at least, as I said, I think there we felt, and we probably may be wrong, we felt that there is opportunity to raise the abstraction level a little bit from what we have now, broadening the scope, looking for similarities, commonalities, maybe with that bringing some established awareness, theories or knowledge that could sort of organize.
Yes, be organizing for emergent technology. So,
There's a few questions where I'm going to ask you to step back for a bit, and there are a few people asking questions about really trying to understand the difference between a sort of service and a good, and what are services. There are a few questions, so there are a few people who are interested in that question, and I know there are people interested. And you're an operations professor who's done a lot of work in services, so it'd be useful, I think, for some people, for 5 minutes, if you could just talk about what you think the main differences are.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So from an operations perspective, this is what I teach in my academic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
We can, when you look at the process, sequence of activities which adds value to customer or an agent, we can classify this process as a service process or a non-service manufacturing, non-service process. This is Scott Sampson's perspective on service operations. And what characterizes a service process as compared to a non-service process is, in a service process, the customer or the agent is involved in the production of the service, either by providing information of labor, of his body or his mind, or healthcare. So the defining feature from an operations perspective of service process is one in which the beneficiary of the value proposition is involved in the production or co-production. This involving the execution of. And so, just to make it clear, when we say there are goods-focused last mile operations and service-focused last mile operations, actually the terms will be a bit confusing because both are service processes.
Yep.
Both are service processes.
Yep.
It's just one is more intensive on the goods, so a great part of the value proposition, the goods-focused process is providing the access to a good. There is a little bit of service element, like the speed in which you get it, maybe how nice the person is when you receive the good, whatever. But it's a continuum. So they're both services. One, the core of the value proposition is you getting hold of tangible objects, whilst the other one, there may not even be a good involved. You may receive an intangible value as a beneficiary, but still involves the movement of stuff towards your location. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's correct. And in terms of service design, the implications for service design of that distinction, or the implications for design of that distinction, could you just talk briefly on the implications for design?
Yes, again, standard service operations.
Yeah, sorry.
No. I understand that audiences are heterogeneous.
Yeah.
So one of the immediate implications of designing and executing a service process is actually one of the points in the slide, is that because beneficiary of the customer, let's say the customer is the customer co-produces the service, so it introduces variability. More variability, there is typically higher levels of customer contact in the service process. So it has implications for efficiency. If you talk about a non-service process, you can imagine that it takes place, you might think of it in the back office, no customer interference, so you can organize all the production activities without interference with the customer, which is a number of advantages for efficiency and planning and so on.
With my ignorance in this field, but I wonder what's the difference between service development process and service process. Service process sounds like more focused on delivery of the service, but
so when I talk about service process, it's a process as in operations, the operations concept, so a series of activities.
yeah. Is it like
Value to a customer, let's say. And service means that this process is co-produced by the customer. That's why it's called a service process. A non-service process, still a process, but the customer is not involved in the production of the, not directly involved in it. Now, then there's the design of these processes. Both of these processes need to be designed. So that's different activity, which is how do you design these processes? And once they're in place, how do you execute them day to day to routinely produce the outcome?
Chris, would you like to add to that?
Very different now. I've got off a tangent, I'm afraid, which is they'll talk about 15-minute communities.
Yes.
15-minute design of location of supply is also very important. I think where I live is 15 minutes. I can get everything within 15 minutes walk up. You know, the butcher's 5 minutes, the chemist 10 minutes, the fish agent is 12 minutes. Everything I can get within 15-minute walk of where I live, which means that I don't have to. You know, for example, yesterday we're out at olives, so I quick up 2 minutes, replenish the olives rather than calling Amazon to deliver. So, to what degree is the location of the producing facilities or the retail facilities part of the designing for minimizing the need for the LMO?
To a large extent, the last mile deliveries is delivered by vans, but if delivered by drones, then that almost becomes continuously emerging.
Except I would not go. Do I need a drone? 2 minutes after, do I need a drone to go 5 minutes to the butcher? Do I need a drone to go 6, 7 minutes to the chemist? No,
Mhm.
no.
Unless
It's
you have
separate. It's
chronic
separate. I think. I don't think it's the same. I don't think it's the same design problem.
A few of the things we're talking about are sort of dangerously skirting the issue of ethics and how ethics affects decisions about design of these delivery processes. So when we talk about, like at the beginning, you're talking about access in public spaces. Well, there's an ethical decision that has to be made about your contribution to society and the way that that affects those decisions. We talk about things like food deliveries or access or so it seems like we keep talking about it without saying the dangerous word about, because ethics itself is a bit of a difficult question to ask. But I think there might be an area here to discuss how ethical considerations affect the design of last mile logistics delivery organizations. Because, it's like the green decision I was talking to you about, it's going to affect on both sides. But also you have sort of the ethical discussion about contribution to the public asset or use of public assets and roads, etc.
It's a good point. I mean, we're talking about inclusive social responsibility, but this is, I think this is worth this difference. It's worth adding discussion. Very quickly.
Check if there's any more online. I think we've covered most of the online. Somebody asks about the role of AI in your research.
I haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
But that's one of the areas I'm considering, but still early stages too for us.
Yeah.
But I think it falls under the analytics bullet point we had there. So, and what Chris was mentioning, so how to use these models and tools to predict or anticipate failures, needs, demands, to reduce the uncertainty.
Yeah.
It's an obvious opportunity for AI. In servitization, I think servitization manufacturing, a lot of discussion around AI is not on the customer experience, it's on scaling. So using AI to scale service.
Yeah.
On the information systems literature, the latest debates are about the broader societal implications of responsible AI design. By responsible, we take the Microsoft 8 principles of responsible AI design, which is an inclusive set of statements that takes into account explicitly how designers imprint their own biases into the design of algorithms.
Because I work in servitization, there's been there's come across a few consulting firms which are doing very interesting things. So one example I came across is, so you have this asset, this machine that is operating in customer's factory. And then at some point you need to send a technician there to maintain or repair it.
Yeah.
And you can develop language models. If you feed them the user manuals of the machines and a lot of technical data, and by querying the system, the technician will say, "What do I need to do to fix this?" Tell him what to do to repair or to make the machine better.
Yes.
Yeah. You can see that.
Imagine you have access to real-time data sets from all the public providers, from traffic data to certain source tool.
I think you should draw this to a halt. Really interesting. I've certainly enjoyed it. It's been great to go back to service ops. So for those of us who are here, we'll clap, and for those online, if you just wave your thumbs, that's great. Thank you.